You probably think discipline should feel bigger than it does. You imagine that if you were truly disciplined, you would wake up energized every morning. You would attack your goals with relentless intensity. Every workout would feel powerful. Every decision would feel certain. Every productive day would leave you feeling accomplished. But that's rarely how real discipline feels. More often, it feels ordinary. It feels like getting up before your mind has finished negotiating with itself. It feels like answering one email you wanted to postpone. It feels like reading 10 pages when no one is watching. It feels like stopping after one episode because tomorrow matters more than tonight. Nothing about these moments looks remarkable. No one applauds them. No one posts about them. No one notices them. And yet, these quiet decisions slowly become a life that other people mistake for talent, luck, or extraordinary willpower. Most people spend years searching for the dramatic secret that will finally change everything. They wait for inspiration. They wait for the perfect system. They wait until they feel ready. Meanwhile, someone else is quietly repeating small promises to themselves every single day. Months later, the difference is impossible to ignore. The strange thing is that quiet discipline almost never feels powerful while you're living it. That's why so many people abandon it. They mistake silence for failure. They mistake slow progress for no progress. They mistake ordinary days for wasted days. But beneath those ordinary days, something invisible is happening. Every promise you keep teaches your brain that your own words matter. Every action repeated without excitement makes future action easier. Every quiet decision becomes another brick in an identity that no longer depends on mood. Eventually, discipline stops being something you force. It becomes someone you are. This audiobook isn't about becoming the loudest person in the room. It isn't about hustling harder than everyone else. It isn't about turning your life into a performance. It's about discovering the form of discipline that survives when motivation disappears, when life becomes difficult, and when nobody is watching. Because the discipline that lasts isn't usually dramatic. It's almost invisible. And that's exactly why it changes everything. By the time we finish this journey together, you'll begin to recognize the hidden habits, mental shifts, and quiet choices that create lasting self-control. And you'll see why the strongest discipline often leaves the smallest footprint. If you're enjoying these audiobooks, remember to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us create more thoughtful conversations like this. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The discipline that doesn't announce itself. If someone asked you to picture a disciplined person, your mind would probably produce a familiar image. You might imagine someone waking before sunrise, running through empty streets while everyone else sleeps. You might picture color-coded calendars, perfectly organized desks, long work sessions, strict diets, and unwavering determination. Discipline in our culture is often portrayed as something dramatic, as though it has to look difficult before it can be effective. The problem is that these images, while sometimes true, only capture the moments that are easy to see. They don't capture the larger reality. Real discipline spends most of its life unnoticed. It happens when you close your laptop after finishing the task you promised yourself you would complete, instead of searching for one more distraction. It happens when you quietly choose water instead of another sugary drink, without making it the centerpiece of your day. It happens when you return a shopping cart, respond with patience instead of irritation, put your phone away during a conversation, or decide to sleep instead of endlessly scrolling, because tomorrow deserves a better version of you. None of these choices feel extraordinary. Most of them won't even become memories. Yet, they are the moments that quietly determine who you become. This is one of the strangest truths about personal growth. The actions that shape your future rarely feel important while you're performing them. Imagine a mason building a stone wall. If you watched him place a single stone, you wouldn't think much of it. One stone seems insignificant. It doesn't resemble a wall. It doesn't look like progress. It certainly doesn't inspire admiration. But return after several months. Now the wall exists. People admire its strength without remembering that it was built through thousands of ordinary placements that looked meaningless on their own. Human character develops in much the same way. You rarely become more disciplined because of one heroic decision. You become disciplined because of hundreds of quiet ones. Our brains, however, don't naturally appreciate this process. We are drawn toward visible change. We enjoy milestones because they give us something concrete to celebrate. Promotions, weight loss, completed projects, certificates, awards, and public recognition all provide obvious evidence that something has happened. Quiet discipline offers no such reward. Often, nothing changes immediately. You finish today's workout, your body looks exactly the same. You study for another hour. You still don't feel like an expert. You save a little money. Your financial life doesn't suddenly transform overnight. Because the rewards arrive slowly, the mind begins asking dangerous questions. Is this even working? Does this really matter? Would skipping today make any difference? Most people answer those questions emotionally. Quiet discipline answers them behaviorally. It simply shows up again tomorrow. There is an important distinction here. People often believe disciplined individuals possess stronger willpower than everyone else. In reality, many disciplined people simply argue with themselves less often. They've learned that every repeated negotiation drains energy. Think about someone deciding whether to exercise. One person spends 40 minutes debating. I'm tired. I deserve a break. I'll start Monday. Maybe tomorrow. By the time they make a decision, they are already mentally exhausted. Another person experiences the same resistance but treats it differently. The alarm rings, they stand up. Not because they're excited, not because they're inspired, but because standing up has become part of the routine rather than part of a debate. The difference isn't physical strength, it's reduced negotiation. Quiet discipline shortens conversations with temptation. Instead of asking, "Do I feel like doing this?" it quietly asks, "Is this what I said I would do?" That shift changes everything. Feelings become information rather than instructions. This doesn't mean disciplined people never feel resistance. They do, sometimes intensely. The difference is that they stop treating every uncomfortable emotion as a command. You can feel lazy without becoming inactive. You can feel anxious without avoiding meaningful work. You can feel discouraged without abandoning your plans. The emotion is acknowledged. The action continues. Over time, something remarkable begins happening. Your confidence starts coming from evidence instead of optimism. Many people wait until they believe in themselves before taking action. Quiet discipline reverses the order. It says, act first. Belief will catch up. Every promise you keep becomes another piece of evidence that you are capable of keeping promises. Every completed task becomes another reason to trust yourself tomorrow. This kind of trust cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed from motivational speeches. It cannot be downloaded from productivity apps. It must be earned through repetition. Consider someone learning to play the piano. The first week feels awkward. The second week still feels awkward. Progress is difficult to hear because the improvements are microscopic. If they judge themselves emotionally every day, they might conclude that nothing is happening. But months later, they play songs that once seemed impossible. The transformation didn't occur during one magical practice session. It happened through hundreds of quiet repetitions that seemed too small to matter. Life works this way more often than we realize. Relationships strengthen through countless ordinary conversations. Trust grows through consistent honesty rather than grand declarations. Careers advance because of years of dependable work that few people notice. Physical health changes through repeated habits that rarely feel exciting. The invisible always precedes the visible. Yet modern life trains us to overlook this. Social media rewards dramatic moments. News highlights extraordinary events. Success stories often skip directly from struggle to achievement, compressing years of ordinary effort into a few inspiring sentences. What disappears from those stories is the quiet middle, the thousands of mornings that looked exactly like the one before. The evenings spent practicing after everyone else had stopped. The weekends when nobody offered encouragement. The moments when progress was too small to measure. That hidden middle is where discipline actually lives. And because it isn't glamorous, many people assume they're doing something wrong when life feels repetitive. But repetition isn't the enemy of growth. It is usually the mechanism of growth. There is another reason quiet discipline often goes unnoticed. It doesn't seek validation. When your actions depend on being seen, your consistency becomes fragile. You'll work hard when people are watching. You'll hesitate when they aren't. Quiet discipline quietly asks a different question. If nobody ever applauded this decision, would it still be worth making? That question removes performance from progress. It shifts your attention away from appearance and toward character, because eventually, the life you build in private becomes impossible to hide in public. People notice the confidence. They notice the calm. They notice the reliability. They notice the steady progress. What they rarely notice are the thousands of invisible decisions that produced those qualities. That's why discipline often looks effortless from the outside. You're seeing the outcome, not the repetitions, not the sacrifices, not the countless moments when someone quietly chose the harder path without announcing it to anyone. Perhaps this is why the most disciplined people often appear surprisingly humble. They know what success actually cost. They remember the ordinary days. They remember failing and starting again. They remember doing the work when nothing felt rewarding. Those memories create gratitude rather than arrogance. As you continue listening, one idea deserves to stay with you. You do not need your life to become more dramatic in order for it to become more meaningful. You do not need louder motivation. You do not need perfect conditions. You do not need to feel extraordinary before taking ordinary action. The quiet discipline no one talks about begins exactly where you are, with one decision, then another, each one too small to impress the world, each one strong enough to slowly change your life. Chapter 2. Why Your Brain Chases Noise Instead of Progress. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to spend an hour watching videos about becoming productive, yet feel strangely resistant to doing 10 minutes of actual work? It isn't because you're lazy. It isn't because you lack ambition. And it certainly isn't because you're incapable of discipline. Part of the answer lies in the way your brain is designed. Your brain is constantly searching for stimulation. Long before smartphones, streaming platforms, and endless notifications existed, this tendency helped humans survive. Our ancestors needed to notice movement in the bushes, changes in weather, unfamiliar sounds, and anything new in their environment. Novelty often meant opportunity or danger. The modern world has learned to exploit that ancient wiring. Every notification promises something new. Every headline hints at something urgent. Every short video offers another burst of surprise. Your attention has become one of the most valuable resources in the world because companies understand a simple truth. The human brain finds novelty difficult to ignore. The problem is that progress rarely feels novel. Real progress repeats itself. Writing another page looks remarkably similar to writing yesterday's page. Practicing an instrument today resembles practicing it last Tuesday. Saving another small amount of money feels almost identical to doing it the month before. The brain compares these experiences. One offers immediate stimulation. The other offers delayed transformation. Without realizing it, most people choose stimulation. Imagine two people sitting at the same desk. The first opens a project that requires deep concentration. For the first 15 minutes, nothing exciting happens. There are no rewards, no dramatic breakthroughs, only slow thinking and careful effort. The second person checks messages, watches a few videos, scrolls through social media, reads comments, and jumps between websites. Every few seconds, something different appears. New faces, new opinions, new jokes, new emotions. Which activity feels more exciting? The answer is obvious. But excitement and progress are not the same thing. One creates movement in your attention. The other creates movement in your life. Quiet discipline begins when you learn to tell the difference. There is another trap hidden inside modern productivity culture. Many people have become addicted to preparing instead of practicing. They buy planners. They organize folders. They watch tutorials. They compare methods. They redesign schedules. They spend hours trying to create the perfect system. None of these activities are inherently bad. Preparation matters. Planning matters. Learning matters. But eventually, preparation becomes another form of entertainment. It creates the comforting feeling that you're moving forward without requiring the discomfort of actually moving. The brain enjoys this illusion because planning feels safe. Doing the work invites uncertainty. You might fail. You might discover you're not as skilled as you hoped. You might struggle. Planning protects you from those possibilities. Action exposes you to them. This is why some people become experts in productivity techniques while remaining beginners in the work that truly matters to them. Quiet discipline quietly interrupts this cycle. It says, you don't need another system today. You need another hour of honest work. At first, this feels disappointing. The mind wants a secret. It wants a shortcut. It wants the one habit that magically makes everything effortless. But life is surprisingly resistant to magic. The most meaningful improvements are usually built through repetition rather than revelation. Consider learning a new language. Imagine spending 6 months reading about language learning without ever speaking. You would know many techniques. You could explain memory systems. You might own several textbooks. But the moment someone asked you a simple question in that language, you would struggle. Knowledge had accumulated. Ability had not. The gap between knowing and becoming is filled by repetition. Yet, repetition rarely feels exciting. This creates another misunderstanding. People assume that if something important becomes repetitive, it should eventually become boring. Sometimes it does. But boredom is not always a warning sign. Sometimes boredom is evidence that you've stopped needing constant excitement to continue. A child learning to ride a bicycle finds every attempt thrilling because everything is unfamiliar. An experienced cyclist doesn't need excitement to ride. The behavior has become part of life. Discipline works in a similar way. When you first begin exercising, every session feels like a test. Months later, exercise simply becomes Tuesday. The emotional drama disappears. The habit remains. Ironically, many people quit precisely when they reach this point. They mistake the loss of excitement for the loss of progress. They think, I don't feel motivated anymore. What they fail to notice is that motivation has quietly been replaced by stability. That is not regression. It is maturity. Think about the strongest bridges in the world. People rarely stop to admire them. Thousands of cars cross them every day without celebration. The bridge performs its purpose quietly. Imagine if the bridge demanded applause before supporting another vehicle. Its usefulness would disappear almost immediately. Your habits become stronger when they stop demanding emotional rewards every time you perform them. Another reason the brain chases noise is that visible activity creates an illusion of importance. Answering dozens of emails can feel productive. Attending back-to-back meetings can feel productive. Constantly switching between tasks can feel productive. But feeling busy and creating value are different experiences. Quiet discipline asks a difficult question. What actually moved forward today? Sometimes the answer is surprisingly small. One meaningful conversation. 3 focused pages. 20 minutes of thoughtful practice. 1 difficult decision that you've been avoiding for weeks. From the outside, these actions seem insignificant compared to a day filled with frantic activity. From the perspective of your future, they are often worth far more. The brain naturally overestimates urgency and underestimates consistency. Urgent things shout, consistent things whisper. Because whispers are easy to ignore, many lives slowly become controlled by whatever is loudest rather than whatever is most important. Learning to hear the whisper is one of the defining skills of quiet discipline. This doesn't mean eliminating every distraction forever. That isn't realistic. It means recognizing distraction for what it is. Not every notification deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves your emotional energy. Not every opportunity deserves your time. Each unnecessary interruption carries a hidden cost. When attention is repeatedly broken, the mind must continually rebuild focus. Imagine trying to fill a bucket while someone keeps poking tiny holes in the bottom. You may continue pouring water, but very little remains. Attention works much the same way. Your best thinking requires continuity. Your deepest work requires uninterrupted time. Your strongest habits require protection. This is why disciplined people often appear less reactive. It isn't that they possess extraordinary concentration. More often, they simply remove unnecessary interruptions before they become problems. They understand that protecting attention is often easier than constantly trying to recover it. Perhaps the greatest illusion of all is believing that dramatic breakthroughs create extraordinary lives. Occasionally they do. Most often, extraordinary lives are built through remarkably ordinary days, repeated with remarkable consistency. The breakthrough is usually visible only in hindsight. Looking back, people point to a successful business, a healthy body, a fulfilled relationship, or a meaningful career. They search for the defining moment. The person who lived that life remembers something different. Another morning, another conversation, another page, another practice session, another promise quietly kept. Progress was never hidden. It was simply too ordinary to attract attention while it was happening. And that may be the greatest challenge of quiet discipline, to keep choosing what matters long before it becomes impressive. Because by the time everyone else notices your progress, the most important work will already have been done. Chapter 3. The Invisible Identity. You build every ordinary day. There is a question that quietly shapes almost every decision you make, even if you never ask it out loud. Who am I? Not the version of yourself that appears in photographs, not the version introduced at work or described on a resume. The quieter version, the one you become when nobody is watching. Most people think identity is something they discover. They spend years searching for it, hoping that one day they will suddenly understand who they truly are. But identity is rarely discovered. More often, it is constructed, not through one defining moment, but through thousands of ordinary actions that slowly teach your mind what kind of person you are. Imagine someone who tells themselves, "I'm terrible at keeping routines." Every time they abandon a project after a week, that belief becomes slightly stronger. Not because it was true in the beginning, but because repeated behavior gradually turns into self-definition. Now imagine someone else. They don't wake up believing they are exceptionally disciplined. In fact, they often feel distracted, tired, and uncertain. But every morning they spend 20 minutes reading. Every evening they prepare for the next day. Every week they honor a few promises they made to themselves. Months pass. Something subtle begins to change. One day, they no longer think, "I'm trying to become disciplined." Instead, they quietly think, "This is just what I do." That small shift is more powerful than it appears, because behavior creates identity, and identity begins protecting behavior. Psychologists have long observed that people naturally try to behave in ways that remain consistent with how they see themselves. Once an action becomes part of your identity, continuing that action requires less internal conflict. Think about someone who says, "I'm a runner." They don't negotiate every morning about whether running is part of their life. Running is simply something runners do. Someone who says, "I'm trying to become a runner," has a very different experience. Every run feels optional. Every skipped session feels easier to justify. The difference isn't physical ability, it's identity. This is why quiet discipline focuses less on dramatic achievements and more on repeated evidence. Every action casts a vote. One workout doesn't make you healthy. One healthy meal doesn't transform your body. One chapter doesn't make you well-read. One honest conversation doesn't define your character. But each one casts another vote for the person you're becoming. Most people underestimate these votes because they only notice elections. They celebrate the finished book, the graduation, the promotion, the marathon. They forget the thousands of invisible ballots that made those outcomes possible. Your identity is counting those votes every day, whether you notice them or not. This explains something many people find confusing. Why is it so difficult to suddenly change your life overnight? Because your mind isn't only protecting habits, it's protecting identity. Suppose someone has spent years believing they are always late. If they arrive on time once, nothing changes. Their brain treats it as an exception. But if they repeatedly arrive early over many weeks, the old identity begins to weaken. Eventually, a new thought appears. Maybe I'm becoming someone who respects time. That sentence changes future behavior. Not because of motivation, because your mind naturally seeks consistency. The same process happens in every area of life. If you repeatedly finish difficult work despite discomfort, your brain slowly concludes, "I'm someone who finishes things." If you repeatedly avoid difficult conversations, another identity quietly develops. "I'm someone who avoids conflict." Neither identity arrives in a single day. Both emerge through repetition. This is why ordinary days matter so much. People often imagine that transformation happens during life's biggest moments: the new job, the wedding, the move, the business launch, the breakthrough. Those moments are important, but they rarely create identity. They reveal the identity that has already been forming beneath the surface. Think of a tree. When a storm arrives, people say the tree proved its strength. But the storm didn't create strong roots. The roots were growing quietly for years before anyone noticed. Character works exactly the same way. Pressure reveals. Routine builds. There is another reason this process remains invisible. Identity changes more slowly than emotions. You can wake up feeling motivated. You can lose motivation by lunchtime. You can feel inspired after reading a book. You can feel discouraged after receiving criticism. Emotions move quickly. Identity moves slowly. And because it moves slowly, people often assume nothing is happening. Imagine depositing a small amount of money into a savings account every day. For weeks, the balance hardly seems different. You wonder whether the effort is worthwhile. Then, months pass. Then, years. Eventually, the accumulated total bears little resemblance to where you began. Identity compounds in exactly the same way. Small actions accumulate into beliefs. Beliefs influence future actions. Future actions reinforce beliefs. The cycle becomes self-sustaining. This is why the earliest stages of discipline feel the hardest. You're acting against your current identity. Every disciplined choice feels unnatural because your brain still associates you with older patterns. It whispers familiar stories. You're inconsistent. You always quit. You've tried this before. Those thoughts are not predictions. They're historical records. They're describing who you were, not who you're becoming. Quiet discipline doesn't argue with those thoughts. It simply keeps collecting new evidence. Over time, evidence becomes stronger than memory. This is one of the reasons self-criticism often backfires. Many people believe harsh self-talk creates accountability. Instead, it often reinforces the very identity they're trying to escape. Imagine repeatedly telling yourself, "I'm lazy. I have no discipline. I never finish anything." Even if those statements contain fragments of truth, repeating them teaches your brain to protect that identity. Your actions eventually begin matching your expectations. Quiet discipline speaks differently. Not through unrealistic affirmations, not by pretending everything is perfect, but through honest observation. I kept today's promise. I showed up even when I didn't feel like it. I handled that better than I used to. These statements don't inflate the ego. They strengthen trust. Trust is one of the quietest forms of confidence, and confidence born from evidence lasts much longer than confidence borrowed from emotion. Consider someone learning to swim. At first, every movement requires conscious thought. They wonder where to place their hands, how to breathe, how to stay afloat. Eventually, after enough repetition, swimming becomes natural. The water hasn't changed. The person has. Discipline follows the same pattern. At first, every decision feels heavy. Should I exercise? Should I study? Should I wake up now? Should I eat this? Later, the questions begin disappearing. Not because life becomes easier, because identity has quietly taken over. The disciplined person doesn't wake each morning asking whether discipline is worth practicing. They wake up and live according to the person they've gradually become. Perhaps this explains why the strongest people rarely describe themselves as strong. They don't think about discipline all day. They don't constantly remind themselves to be responsible. Their habits have become part of who they are. The extraordinary has become ordinary. And that is the destination quiet discipline has been leading toward from the very beginning. Not a life where every decision feels difficult. A life where the right decisions become increasingly natural because they align with the identity you've patiently built. Tomorrow morning, you may not feel different. Next week, you may still question your progress. But every promise you keep is another vote. Every ordinary day is another brick. Every quiet action is another root growing beneath the surface. Long before anyone else notices your transformation, your identity will already be changing. And once your identity changes, your life begins changing with it. Chapter 4. Escaping the addiction to dramatic change. There is an uncomfortable question that most people never ask themselves. What if you're not addicted to comfort? What if you're addicted to intensity? At first, those ideas seem like opposites. We usually imagine the biggest obstacle to growth is laziness, the desire to avoid effort. But for many people, the real obstacle is something much more subtle. They only believe change is real when it feels dramatic. If a new routine doesn't transform their life within a week, they begin looking for another one. If a book doesn't produce an immediate breakthrough, they move on to the next author. If a workout program stops feeling exciting, they search for a different plan. If meditation becomes quiet instead of profound, they assume they're doing it wrong. Notice the pattern. The problem isn't a lack of action. The problem is an expectation that meaningful change should always feel emotionally significant. Modern culture quietly encourages this belief. Transformation is usually shown as a single defining moment. A person reaches their breaking point. They make one bold decision. Music swells. Everything changes. These stories are compelling because they compress years into minutes. But real life almost never unfolds that way. Most lasting change doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with repetition. And repetition is emotionally ordinary. This creates a strange paradox. The habits most likely to transform your life are often the least exciting to perform. Reading 20 pages every evening doesn't feel life-changing. Going to bed 30 minutes earlier doesn't feel revolutionary. Saving a small amount of money each month doesn't create instant satisfaction. Practicing a skill for 40 minutes rarely produces dramatic improvement by tomorrow morning. Yet, over several years, these quiet actions reshape entire lives. The difficulty is that your brain struggles to appreciate gradual change because it naturally notices contrast more than continuity. Imagine walking into a room where the temperature suddenly drops by 15 degrees. You notice immediately. Now imagine the temperature falling by a tiny fraction every hour. You might not notice it all until much later. Growth often works like the second example. Because each day's improvement is small, it escapes your attention. You conclude that nothing is happening. In reality, everything is happening, just slowly. This misunderstanding explains why so many people become trapped in cycles of reinvention. January begins. They buy new notebooks, create ambitious schedules, promise themselves that this year will be different. For 2 weeks, everything feels exciting. The novelty creates energy. Then, ordinary life returns. Work becomes busy. Motivation fades. The routine begins feeling repetitive. Instead of recognizing this as the beginning of genuine discipline, they interpret it as failure. So they start over. A different planner, a different app, a different challenge, a different morning routine. Another fresh beginning. Months later, they have accumulated many beginnings, but very few continuations. Quiet discipline asks something much less exciting. Can you continue after the excitement disappears? Because that is where real change begins. Think about a musician practicing scales. No audience applauds. No dramatic breakthroughs happen every session. Many practices feel almost identical. Yet those repetitive exercises eventually allow the musician to perform effortlessly before thousands of people. The audience sees confidence. The musician remembers repetition. This difference between appearance and reality exists almost everywhere. People admire fluent speakers without seeing years of awkward conversations. They admire successful entrepreneurs without seeing countless ordinary workdays. They admire calm individuals without noticing the daily choices that gradually built emotional stability. Visible success is usually the shadow cast by invisible consistency. Another reason people chase dramatic change is that dramatic moments provide emotional certainty. When you make a bold declaration, everything changes starting today. You feel powerful. The decision itself creates momentum, but momentum generated by emotion has a weakness. Emotion naturally rises and falls. If your commitment depends entirely on emotional intensity, your discipline rises and falls with it. Quiet discipline seeks something more reliable. It builds systems that continue even when emotions become ordinary. Imagine two people planting a garden. The first waits for perfect weather. When the sun shines brightly, they work enthusiastically. When clouds appear, they stay inside. The second person understands that gardens are built across many different kinds of days. Some pleasant, some frustrating, some ordinary. Months later, one garden flourishes. The other remains mostly imagined. The difference wasn't knowledge. Both understood how seeds grow. The difference was consistency through changing conditions. Life asks for the same thing. You don't need perfect emotional weather. You need enough steadiness to continue planting. There is another hidden danger in dramatic thinking. It teaches you to measure yourself by exceptional days instead of average ones. Suppose you have one incredibly productive Saturday. You organize your home, exercise, read, complete several projects. You feel proud. Then Monday arrives. You answer emails, cook dinner, finish one important task, take a walk, go to bed. Compared with Saturday, Monday feels unimpressive. But if Monday resembles most of your future Mondays, it may matter far more. Your life is shaped less by your best day than by your most repeated day. Quiet discipline, therefore, pays close attention to averages, not because excellence is unimportant. Because averages reveal reality. If you write 1,000 words every day, the occasional day of writing 3,000 becomes a bonus rather than a necessity. If you exercise 4 days every week for years, missing one workout becomes almost irrelevant. Consistency reduces the emotional weight of individual successes and failures. This creates tremendous psychological freedom. You no longer need every day to be extraordinary. You simply need most days to move gently in the right direction. The pressure decreases. The progress increases. Perhaps the greatest gift of quiet discipline is that it replaces drama with trust. Instead of constantly asking, "Am I changing?" you begin asking, "Did I keep today's promise?" That question is wonderfully small. It doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't require comparing yourself to anyone else. It only asks whether today's actions matched today's intentions. Enough days answered with yes eventually produce a life that looks extraordinary from the outside. But while you're living it, it still feels remarkably ordinary. There is wisdom in that ordinariness. A river does not carve through stone because it is violent every day. It succeeds because it keeps flowing. Its strength lies in persistence, not spectacle. Your own life follows the same principle, the routines that seem too small to matter. The conversations handled with patience, the pages read before bed, the walks taken instead of skipped, the promises quietly honored. These are not interruptions between important moments. They are the important moments. When you stop demanding dramatic evidence that your life is improving, you become free to notice something else. Progress has been quietly happening all along, not in explosions, not in overnight transformations, but in the steady accumulation of ordinary days that are slowly making you into someone stronger, calmer, and more dependable than the person you were yesterday. And once you begin trusting that process, you no longer need constant excitement to keep moving forward. You simply continue, because continuing has become part of who you are. Chapter 5. The Power of Becoming Unimpressed by Motivation. There is a sentence you hear so often that it has almost become a law of personal development. You just need more motivation. People say it before starting a business, before exercising, before studying, before changing careers, before repairing relationships. Motivation is treated as though it were the engine of every meaningful achievement. When it arrives, life moves forward. When it disappears, progress stops. But if you quietly observe the people who build remarkable lives, over decades, something surprising begins to emerge. They don't seem particularly fascinated by motivation. In fact, many of them hardly mention it at all. Not because motivation is useless, because they've learned it is unreliable. Imagine waiting for the wind before deciding whether to sail. Some days the wind would carry you effortlessly. Other days, your boat would remain tied to the dock. You would spend far more time watching the weather than crossing the ocean. This is what happens when your life depends entirely on motivation. You become a spectator of your own potential. Every morning begins with the same question. Do I feel like it today? The answer changes with sleep, stress, weather, mood, unexpected conversations, physical health, and countless other variables beyond your control. Some days the answer is yes. Many days it is not. If your actions rise and fall with those answers, consistency becomes impossible. Quiet discipline begins with a different understanding. Feelings are real. They are simply not always reliable guides for important decisions. Think about brushing your teeth. Most mornings, you don't experience a surge of inspiration before picking up the toothbrush. You don't watch motivational videos about dental hygiene. You don't wait until you emotionally crave the experience. You simply do it. Not because the task became exciting, because it became normal, That distinction matters. The greatest advantage of discipline isn't that it makes difficult things easier. It's that it makes important things ordinary. When something becomes ordinary, it stops demanding emotional permission. You no longer negotiate. You simply act. This shift is subtle, but it changes the entire relationship you have with effort. Many people unknowingly treat motivation as proof that they are on the right path. When motivation fades, they assume something is wrong. Maybe the goal isn't right. Maybe the routine isn't working. Maybe they aren't meant for this. But motivation naturally fades because the brain is designed to adapt. The first week of learning guitar feels exciting because every chord is new. After several months, much of that novelty disappears. The music hasn't become less valuable. Your brain has simply become familiar with the process. If you mistake familiarity for failure, you'll abandon every worthwhile pursuit just as it begins producing lasting results. This is one reason experts often appear calm while beginners appear enthusiastic. The beginner is fueled by excitement. The expert is sustained by commitment. Excitement burns brightly. Commitment burns steadily. Over years, steady flames illuminate much more than brief flashes ever could. There is another misunderstanding hidden inside motivation. People often believe they need motivation before taking action. Yet, the relationship frequently works in reverse. Action creates motivation. Think back to a time when you dreaded starting a task, perhaps writing a report, cleaning a room, studying for an exam. The hardest moment was often the first 5 minutes. Then, something shifted. Your attention settled. Momentum developed. The work became easier than your imagination predicted. Nothing magical happened. Your brain simply stopped anticipating the task and started engaging with it. The resistance belonged to the beginning, not the work itself. This is why quiet discipline places enormous importance on starting. Not finishing perfectly, starting honestly. Open the document, put on the running shoes, read one page, write one paragraph, wash one dish. Small beginnings often dissolve resistance that endless thinking only strengthens. The mind has a peculiar habit. It exaggerates future discomfort while underestimating its own ability to adapt. Before exercising, the workout seems exhausting. Halfway through, it feels manageable. Before making a difficult phone call, anxiety grows. Once the conversation begins, clarity often replaces fear. Before beginning a creative project, perfectionism whispers that you're not ready. After an hour of work, ideas begin flowing. The lesson is consistent. Your imagination usually experiences more resistance than reality. Quiet discipline understands this. Instead of debating every emotion, it gently steps into action before the debate grows louder. This doesn't mean ignoring your emotional life. Emotions contain valuable information. Exhaustion may signal a need for rest. Frustration may reveal an ineffective strategy. Sadness may point towards something requiring attention. The goal is not emotional numbness. The goal is refusing to let every temporary feeling become a permanent decision. Consider the seasons. No farmer expects summer weather every day of the year. There are storms, cold mornings, unexpected droughts, strong winds. Yet, planting continues because the seasons are accepted rather than resisted. Your internal life has seasons too. Some mornings bring energy, others bring heaviness. Some weeks are filled with confidence, others with doubt. If you expect perfect emotional weather before acting, your harvest will always be delayed. Quiet discipline quietly says, plant anyway. Not recklessly, not without rest, but without demanding emotional certainty before every meaningful action. Over time, something remarkable begins happening. You stop seeing yourself as someone who occasionally becomes motivated. You begin seeing yourself as someone who follows through. This identity changes the questions you ask. Instead of wondering, how can I stay motivated forever? You begin asking, What makes it easier to keep showing up? That question leads to practical wisdom. Preparing your environment, reducing unnecessary decisions, creating simple routines, protecting sleep, limiting distractions, planning tomorrow before today ends. None of these strategies are exciting. That's precisely why they work. They reduce dependence on emotion. Imagine climbing a mountain. One person waits until they feel inspired to take another step. The other simply keeps walking. Not quickly, not dramatically, just steadily. Hours later, the distance between them is impossible to ignore. The mountain wasn't conquered by inspiration. It was climbed one ordinary step at a time. Life rarely asks for spectacular effort every day. It asks for enough consistency to keep taking the next step. This realization can feel strangely disappointing at first. The mind loves dramatic secrets. It hopes someone will reveal the missing piece that suddenly makes discipline effortless. But the deeper truth is quieter. The strongest people aren't constantly searching for motivation because they've stopped treating it as the foundation of their lives. They welcome it when it arrives. They appreciate the energy it brings. But they refuse to panic when it leaves because they know something more dependable has taken its place. Habit, commitment, identity, trust. Those qualities don't generate headlines. They don't produce dramatic stories, but they quietly build extraordinary lives. Perhaps that is why the most disciplined people often appear so calm. They no longer spend their days chasing emotional highs. They spend them honoring ordinary commitments. And in doing so, they discover a freedom that motivation alone can never provide. The freedom to continue. Even on quiet days, especially on quiet days. Chapter 6. Small decisions that quietly rewrite your future. Imagine standing at a fork in the road. One path curves gently to the left, the other curves gently to the right. From where you're standing, the difference between them is almost impossible to see. If you walked either path for 100 meters, they would still appear nearly identical. The trees would look the same. The air would feel the same. You might even believe both roads lead to the same destination. But continue walking for 50 kilometers. Now the distance between the two paths is enormous. One reaches the coast, the other disappears into the mountains. The difference was never created by one dramatic turn. It was created by a tiny decision made much earlier. Life unfolds in much the same way. People often imagine that their future will be shaped by life's biggest choices: where they live, whom they marry, what career they pursue. Those decisions certainly matter. But beneath them lies another layer of choices that receive almost no attention. Do you go to bed when you plan to? Do you spend 10 minutes reading or 10 minutes scrolling? Do you keep the promise you made this morning? Do you speak with patience or irritation? Do you save a little or spend a little? These moments seem too small to deserve serious thought, yet they quietly determine the direction of your life. One of the greatest illusions of human thinking is believing that small choices remain small. They don't. They accumulate. A single drop of water appears harmless, but enough drops, falling in the same place for years, can wear through stone. The power was never in one drop. It was in their consistency. Your decisions behave the same way. A single unhealthy meal will not ruin your health. One skipped workout will not erase your strength. One late night will not destroy your focus. But when a decision repeats often enough, it stops being an isolated event. It becomes a pattern, and patterns eventually become destiny. This is why quiet discipline pays attention to moments that most people ignore. Not because each one is life-changing by itself, because each one nudges the future in a particular direction. Think about a pilot flying across the ocean. If the airplane's nose shifts by just 1 degree after takeoff, nobody on board notices. The passengers continue reading, talking, sleeping. Everything feels normal. Hours later, that tiny adjustment has carried the aircraft hundreds of kilometers away from its intended destination. 1 degree seemed insignificant. Time multiplied its consequences. Your daily choices work exactly the same way. You rarely notice the effect today. Time notices for you. There is another reason small decisions matter so much. They shape the person who makes the next decision. Suppose you wake up and make your bed. The bed itself isn't the important part. The important part is the message quietly sent to your mind. I follow through. Later that morning, another choice appears. Should you begin the difficult task now or postpone it? Without realizing it, your earlier decision influences the next one. Not because making the bed magically creates productivity, but because actions leave psychological footprints. Every completed promise makes the next promise slightly easier to keep. Every broken promise makes the next excuse slightly easier to believe. This is how momentum quietly develops, not through dramatic breakthroughs, through repeated alignment between intention and action. Most people underestimate this because they judge choices by their immediate consequences. Imagine someone deciding whether to read 10 pages tonight. They ask themselves, will 10 pages really make a difference? Probably not. Not tonight. But that isn't the right question. The better question is, who am I becoming by making this choice? That question reaches beyond tonight. It reaches into next month, next year, the next decade. Quiet discipline is rarely concerned with isolated moments. It is always asking what those moments are teaching your future self. There is a fascinating tendency in human psychology. We often believe that our future selves will somehow possess greater discipline than we do today. I'll start exercising next month. I'll save money once work settles down. I'll read more when life becomes less busy. The future becomes a warehouse where we store every meaningful intention. But when that future finally arrives, it brings the same mind, the same habits, and the same patterns that existed before. Tomorrow is shaped by today far more than today is rescued by tomorrow. The disciplined person understands this. Instead of waiting to become someone different before acting differently, they allow repeated actions to gradually create a different person. It is a slower process, but it is a real one. Consider a craftsman carving a piece of wood. Each stroke of the chisel removes only a tiny amount. If you watched for 5 minutes, you might think almost nothing had changed. The craftsman doesn't panic. He understands the nature of his work. He trusts accumulation. Eventually, a beautiful sculpture emerges. The observer sees the finished piece. The craftsman remembers thousands of careful strokes. Life quietly rewards the craftsman far more often than the spectator. There is also freedom hidden inside small decisions. When people imagine changing their lives, they often overwhelm themselves. They create enormous expectations. Wake at 5 every morning. Exercise 2 hours a day. Never eat sugar again. Read 50 books. Meditate an hour daily. Launch a business. Learn another language. The plan looks impressive. The burden feels impossible. After a few weeks, exhaustion replaces enthusiasm. Then comes disappointment. Quiet discipline asks for something much smaller. What is the next promise you can realistically keep? Not forever. Today. That question reduces fear. It replaces fantasy with action. 1 glass of water, 1 paragraph, 1 walk around the block, 1 honest conversation, 1 page, 1 act of patience. Tiny actions rarely threaten the mind, but repeated often enough, they quietly transform it. This doesn't mean thinking small forever. It means respecting how big things are built. A cathedral is constructed 1 stone at a time. A novel is written 1 sentence at a time. A forest grows 1 season at a time. The scale of the outcome never changes the nature of the process. Another misconception deserves attention. People often believe discipline is about making difficult decisions. In reality, disciplined people frequently reduce the number of decisions they have to make. They eat similar breakfasts, exercise at familiar times, prepare clothes the night before, keep routines simple. From the outside, this can appear repetitive. From the inside, it creates remarkable freedom. Every unnecessary decision consumes attention. By simplifying the ordinary, they preserve mental energy for what truly requires thought. Quiet discipline is not about making life harder. It is about removing friction from doing what matters. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack up a hill. Now imagine stopping every 100 meters to add another unnecessary stone. Eventually, the climb becomes exhausting. Much of modern life works this way. Tiny complications accumulate until ordinary responsibilities begin feeling overwhelming. Removing those stones often matters more than becoming stronger. As this chapter comes to a close, consider your own day, not your biggest goals, not your 5-year plan. Today. There will be dozens of moments that appear insignificant. Whether to stand up when the alarm rings, whether to finish what you started, whether to speak kindly, whether to put the phone down, whether to take the next small step. Each choice will seem almost invisible, almost too ordinary to matter. But remember the two roads. They looked almost identical in the beginning. Only time revealed where they truly led. Your future is rarely rewritten by one extraordinary decision. More often, it is quietly rewritten by ordinary decisions that nobody notices, including you, until one day you look back and realize those small choices carried you somewhere you never could have reached, all at once. Chapter 7. Learning to work without an audience. There is a question that quietly reveals more about your discipline than almost any other. Would you still do it if nobody ever knew? Not if nobody praised you? Not if nobody thanked you? Not if nobody liked, shared, commented, or congratulated you? Simply if nobody knew. For many people, this question is uncomfortable because it exposes something we rarely admit. Much of our effort is tied, at least in part, to being seen. This isn't a flaw unique to you. Human beings are social creatures. For thousands of years, belonging to a group increased the chances of survival. Approval from others often meant safety. Rejection could carry serious consequences. Your brain still carries traces of that ancient world. It enjoys recognition. It responds to praise. It feels rewarded when other people notice your effort. There is nothing inherently wrong with this. Encouragement can be deeply meaningful. Support from others can help us through difficult seasons. The danger appears when external recognition quietly becomes the fuel for internal commitment. If you only work hard when someone is watching, your discipline becomes dependent on an audience. Imagine two artists. The first begins painting because thousands of people admire their work online. Every finished painting receives praise. Every new piece brings excitement. Then, gradually, the attention slows. The comments become fewer. The excitement fades. Almost without noticing, the artist paints less often. Not because they stopped loving art, because they had slowly begun creating for applause instead of creation itself. Now imagine another artist. They paint in a small studio. Some pieces are never shown to anyone. Others remain unfinished. The work itself is the reward. Recognition is welcome, but it is not the reason they return to the canvas each morning. Years later, which artist is more likely to continue? The answer has very little to do with talent. It has everything to do with where motivation comes from. Quiet discipline grows strongest in private. Not because privacy is morally superior, because private effort builds a kind of psychological independence that public approval never can. Think about the people you quietly admire. The teacher who prepares thoughtful lessons long after students have left. The nurse who offers kindness even when nobody notices. The parent who wakes before everyone else to prepare for another day. The craftsman who sands the back of a piece of furniture that no customer will ever see. What makes these actions meaningful isn't that they attract attention. It's that they reflect character. Character is what remains when performance disappears. Modern life makes this distinction increasingly difficult. Many experiences that were once private have become public. Meals become photographs. Workouts become posts. Vacations become stories. Achievements become announcements. Again, there is nothing inherently wrong with sharing joyful moments. The problem begins when sharing quietly replaces experiencing, or when being seen becomes more important than becoming. Imagine planting a tree. One person digs carefully, waters consistently, protects the young roots, and waits patiently. Another spends most of their energy decorating the sign beside the tree. From a distance, the sign may attract more attention. But years later, only one person has a forest. Quiet discipline asks you to become deeply interested in roots rather than signs. The roots of your habits, the roots of your attention, the roots of your integrity. Because roots determine whether anything meaningful can survive storms, there is another hidden cost to living for an audience. It encourages comparison. The moment your work becomes primarily about how it appears to others, your attention naturally shifts toward what everyone else is doing. You begin measuring your progress against theirs. They seem to advance faster. Their results appear bigger. Their lives look more exciting. Comparison quietly steals satisfaction from work that once brought genuine fulfillment. This is one reason social comparison can become so exhausting. You are comparing your ordinary Tuesday with someone else's carefully selected highlight. The comparison isn't fair. More importantly, it isn't useful. Quiet discipline redirects your attention. Instead of asking, "How do I look compared to them?" it asks, "Did I honor the work I intended to do today?" That question is strangely liberating. It returns responsibility to where it belongs, within your own choices. There is a story told about a master carpenter. When building a cabinet, he spent just as much care smoothing the back panel as the front, even though the back would rest against a wall where no customer could ever see it. When someone asked why he bothered, he smiled and said, "Because I'll know it's there." Whether the story is historical or simply symbolic hardly matters. Its wisdom remains. Integrity is often defined by what you do when shortcuts would remain invisible. Would you study honestly if nobody checked? Would you return extra change if the cashier never noticed? Would you finish quality work if your employer couldn't tell the difference? These questions reveal something deeper than discipline. They reveal alignment between values and actions. That alignment produces an unusual kind of peace. When your private life and public life move in the same direction, there is less pretending, less performance, less anxiety about maintaining appearances. You become one person instead of many versions of yourself. Perhaps this is why quiet discipline often creates calm. There is no constant effort to manage an image. Energy that once fueled appearances becomes available for meaningful work. You stop asking whether your effort is impressive enough. You begin asking whether it is honest enough. There is also tremendous freedom in becoming comfortable with invisible progress. Suppose you spend 6 months improving a skill that nobody notices. At first, this may feel discouraging. Then, something changes. You realize that your satisfaction no longer depends entirely on immediate recognition. You begin enjoying the work itself. This is a profound shift. Because when the process becomes rewarding, consistency becomes far easier. Imagine learning to play chess. If your only source of satisfaction comes from winning tournaments, you'll likely become discouraged long before reaching that level. But if you genuinely enjoy understanding positions, solving problems, and seeing your own thinking improve, Every practice session contains its own reward. The destination still matters. It simply no longer carries the entire burden of your happiness. This is how quiet discipline protects itself. It separates the value of the work from the visibility of the work. History quietly supports this principle. Many of humanity's greatest achievements spent years developing in obscurity. Scientific discoveries were researched long before they changed the world. Books were written in silence before reaching readers. Businesses operated unnoticed before becoming household names. Even forests spend years strengthening their roots before growing high enough to dominate the landscape. Nature rarely rushes what is meant to last. Neither should you. As you continue your own journey, there will be days when your effort feels invisible. Nobody comments. Nobody congratulates you. Nobody seems aware of the promises you've kept. Those days are not interruptions in your progress. They are often where your deepest progress is taking place. Because each time you choose the right action without needing recognition, you strengthen something that applause alone can never build. Self-respect. Unlike confidence borrowed from compliments, self-respect grows quietly. It is earned through private consistency, through promises kept when excuses were available, through honest work when shortcuts seemed easier, through patient effort long before anyone notices the results. And one day, people may admire the life you've built. They may call you disciplined, reliable, successful. What they won't see are the countless quiet mornings, ordinary afternoons, and unnoticed evenings that made those words true. But you will know. And that knowledge is enough. Chapter 8. The Calm Rhythm of Consistency. There is a common belief that if you want extraordinary results, you must live an extraordinary life. Every day should be intense. Every effort should push your limits. Every week should contain a breakthrough. Anything less feels like settling. It is an appealing idea. It is also one of the fastest roads to exhaustion. Many people spend their lives moving between two extremes. One week, they are unstoppable. They wake before sunrise, exercise every day, read for hours, eat perfectly, work late into the evening. They feel powerful, certain, completely transformed. Then something interrupts the rhythm. A stressful week at work, an unexpected illness, a family responsibility, a difficult conversation. The perfect routine begins to crack. One missed day becomes 3. 3 becomes 10. Eventually, they stop altogether. A few weeks later, guilt begins to build. They promise themselves another fresh start. The cycle repeats. This pattern has become so common that many people mistake it for normal. They believe progress naturally comes in waves of intense effort, followed by long periods of inactivity. But quiet discipline offers another possibility. Instead of building your life around intensity, build it around rhythm. The difference is subtle, but profound. Intensity asks, "How much can I do today?" Rhythm asks, "What can I keep doing next month?" The first question produces impressive days. The second produces remarkable years. Think about your heartbeat. If your heart behaved the way many people approach discipline, it would beat with incredible force for 1 minute, then stop for the next 5. No one would call that strength. Strength lies in steady repetition, not dramatic bursts. Your breathing follows the same principle. The ocean follows it. The seasons follow it. Nature is filled with examples of quiet consistency. The tide does not rush because it feels ambitious. Winter does not skip ahead because it is impatient. A tree does not grow 3 meters in one afternoon to make up for a slow week. Life unfolds through rhythm. Human flourishing is no different. Yet, we often resist this truth because rhythm feels unimpressive. There is no dramatic story in writing 500 words every day. No exciting headline about taking a walk every evening. No viral moment in choosing sleep instead of another hour online. But if those actions continue for years, They quietly create a life that appears extraordinary to everyone else. The irony is difficult to ignore. The behaviors that look ordinary in the moment often produce extraordinary outcomes. The behaviors that look extraordinary in the moment often prove impossible to sustain. Imagine two runners preparing for a marathon. The first runs as hard as possible every session. Some days they feel amazing. Other days they are exhausted. Injuries begin appearing. Their body never fully recovers. The second runner leaves each practice feeling like they could have done a little more. The pace is steady. Recovery is built into the routine. Months later, one runner is still training. The other is recovering from burnout. Who showed more discipline? From the outside, the first runner looked more committed. From the perspective of time, the second runner was. Quiet discipline understands something that excitement often forgets. Consistency is not the enemy of ambition. It is the mechanism through which ambition survives. There is another misconception that quietly sabotages progress. People often believe discipline means constantly pushing harder. But harder is not always better. Sometimes harder simply means unsustainable. Imagine trying to carry every grocery bag from your car in one trip. For a moment, it feels efficient. Your hands are full. Your shoulders ache. You struggle to open the door. One bag slips. Another tears. Eventually, you drop half of what you were trying to carry. Now imagine making 2 calm trips instead. You arrive with everything. Sometimes slowing down is not laziness. It is wisdom. The same principle applies to your habits. If your schedule leaves no room for rest, one unexpected event can collapse the entire structure. If your routine depends on perfect conditions, it will disappear the moment life becomes imperfect. Quiet discipline prefers flexibility over fragility. It asks, how can this continue when life becomes difficult? Because life will become difficult. Not occasionally, inevitably. Travel will interrupt routines. Illness will change plans. Responsibilities will multiply. Unexpected opportunities will appear. A rhythm designed only for ideal circumstances is not a rhythm at all. It is a temporary performance. True consistency includes adaptation. Perhaps your usual workout lasts an hour. Today, you only have 20 minutes. Quiet discipline doesn't declare the day ruined. It adjusts. Perhaps your reading routine is 30 pages. Tonight, you manage 10. The habit survives. The rhythm continues. Many people underestimate the value of protecting continuity. They believe anything less than perfection is failure. In reality, preserving the habit often matters more than maximizing the day's performance. Imagine a musician practicing every day. Some sessions are inspired. Others feel clumsy. Some produce breakthroughs. Others simply maintain skill. The musician understands that not every practice must be exceptional. Its purpose is to remain connected to the craft. That connection matters, because habits weaken not only through inactivity, but through broken identity. Every time you return, you remind yourself, this is still part of who I am. Even a shortened routine sends that message. Even imperfect consistency reinforces it. This perspective changes how you respond to setbacks. Instead of saying, I missed 3 days, I've ruined everything, you begin saying, I'll continue today. Notice the absence of drama. No emotional speeches. No grand declarations. Just a quiet return. That simple ability, to return without self-punishment, is one of the rarest forms of discipline. Many people know how to begin. Far fewer know how to resume. Resuming requires humility. It asks you to accept imperfection without abandoning commitment. A pianist who misses one practice does not sell the piano. A gardener who misses one watering does not uproot the garden. They simply return. Your own habits deserve the same patience. There is another gift hidden inside rhythm. It reduces decision fatigue. When actions occur at roughly the same time, in roughly the same way, they demand less mental energy. You stop reinventing every day. The question changes from, should I do this? To, it's time. That may sound almost too simple. Yet, simplicity often outperforms complexity. Every unnecessary decision is another opportunity to hesitate. Rhythm quietly removes hesitation. It carries you forward, almost before your doubts have time to speak. As the years pass, something remarkable begins to happen. Your routines stop feeling like obligations. They become part of the architecture of your life. Just as walls quietly support a house without drawing attention to themselves, your habits begin supporting your days without demanding constant thought. You no longer rely on bursts of enthusiasm. You rely on structure. And structure is far more patient than emotion. If you study history, you'll notice that civilizations were rarely built through isolated acts of brilliance. They were built through repeated practices. Farmers planting season after season. Builders laying one stone after another. Teachers passing knowledge from one generation to the next. Progress accumulated because ordinary people continued ordinary work over extraordinary lengths of time. Your own life follows the same principle. The person you become 10 years from now will not be shaped primarily by your most inspired afternoon. They will be shaped by the rhythm of your ordinary weeks, the meals you repeatedly choose, the conversations you repeatedly have, the books you repeatedly read, the promises you repeatedly keep. The quiet rhythm of those actions will gradually become the rhythm of your character. And when someone someday asks how you became so disciplined, you may struggle to answer. Not because there was a secret, but because there wasn't. There was only another morning, another choice, another ordinary day, repeated so consistently that over time, the ordinary became extraordinary. Chapter 9. How quiet discipline changes the way you think. When people talk about discipline, they usually describe what it helps you accomplish. They talk about healthier bodies, successful careers, financial stability, completed projects, goals achieved. These outcomes are real, but they are not the deepest change discipline creates. The most profound transformation happens somewhere far less visible. It happens inside your own mind. Long before quiet discipline changes your circumstances, it changes the way you think. At first, this change is almost impossible to notice. You still face the same responsibilities, the same distractions, the same doubts. Life on the outside appears largely unchanged, but your inner conversations begin to sound different, and those conversations quietly reshape everything that follows. Think back to a promise you once made to yourself. Perhaps you planned to exercise every morning, learn a new skill, save money, wake up earlier. For a few days, everything went well. Then, something interrupted the plan. You missed one day, then another. Soon the promise disappeared. Maybe you told yourself it wasn't the right time. Maybe you blamed a busy schedule. Maybe you simply stopped thinking about it. On the surface, it seemed like a small failure, but something else happened beneath it. Your brain recorded another piece of evidence. Not evidence about your ability. Evidence about your reliability. Without realizing it, you taught yourself that your own promises were negotiable. Now imagine the opposite. You decide to read for 20 minutes every evening. Some nights you enjoy it. Other nights, you feel tired. Occasionally, you would rather do something else. Yet you continue. One evening becomes 10. 10 become 50. Months pass. Again, something happens beneath the surface. Your brain quietly reaches a conclusion. When I say I will do something, I usually do it. That sentence is small. Its consequences are enormous, because the way you think about yourself influences every future decision. This is one reason self-trust is so valuable. Many people spend years trying to build confidence. They read books, listen to speeches, repeat positive affirmations. Some of these practices can certainly help. But confidence that depends only on encouraging words often disappears the moment life becomes difficult. Self-trust grows differently. It grows from evidence. Each promise you keep becomes another reason to believe your future self. Unlike borrowed confidence, earned trust is difficult to shake. Imagine crossing a bridge every day on your way to work. The first few crossings might feel uncertain. You pay attention to every sound, every vibration, every movement. After months of crossing safely, you stop thinking about the bridge. Trust has quietly replaced doubt. The bridge did not become stronger. Your repeated experience changed your perception. Your relationship with yourself develops the same way. Each time you follow through, your mind relaxes a little. It stops questioning every commitment. It begins expecting consistency. That expectation changes behavior. Another way quiet discipline changes thinking is by weakening emotional exaggeration. Have you noticed how the mind tends to speak in extremes? I've ruined everything. I'll never succeed. I always fail. Nothing is changing. These thoughts feel convincing because emotions often magnify the present moment. A single setback begins looking permanent. One mistake feels like a complete identity. Quiet discipline quietly interrupts this habit. Not by pretending setbacks don't matter, but by placing them inside a larger pattern. Suppose you've exercised consistently for 6 months. Then you miss one workout. Does your identity disappear? Of course not. One missed day becomes a small event inside a much larger story. Consistency changes perspective. Individual failures lose the power to define the whole narrative. This creates emotional resilience. You stop treating every obstacle like a verdict. Instead, it becomes information. What happened? What can I adjust? How do I continue? Notice how different these questions are. They invite learning instead of self-condemnation. There is another quiet shift that discipline creates. It teaches patience, not passive waiting, active patience. The kind that continues working while results remain invisible. Most people are uncomfortable with delayed rewards. Planting seeds is easy. Waiting months for growth is difficult. Studying for years before mastering a profession is difficult. Saving small amounts before experiencing financial freedom is difficult. The mind naturally wants reassurance. Is this working? Quiet discipline answers through action rather than emotion. Keep planting. This changes the way uncertainty feels. Instead of becoming a reason to quit, uncertainty becomes part of the process. You stop demanding constant proof that progress exists. You trust that today's effort belongs to tomorrow's results. That trust produces calm, not because life becomes predictable, because your commitment no longer depends on immediate evidence. Think about a sculptor working with marble. For hours, they chip away at the stone. To someone passing by, it may look repetitive, even pointless. Only the sculptor understands that every careful strike reveals something hidden inside. Life often asks for the same kind of patience. The work may appear unchanged for long stretches. Then, one day, the shape becomes unmistakable. The transformation did not begin that morning. It had been unfolding quietly all along. Discipline also changes the way you interpret discomfort. In the beginning, discomfort feels like a warning. If something is difficult, you assume something is wrong. Perhaps this goal isn't right. Perhaps you're incapable. Perhaps you should stop. Over time, your relationship with discomfort evolves. You begin recognizing that many worthwhile experiences include temporary discomfort. Exercise challenges the body. Learning challenges the mind. Honest conversations challenge the emotions. Growth often asks you to spend time outside familiarity. discomfort stops being an alarm. It becomes a companion, not one you enjoy, one you understand. This subtle change is powerful because it prevents unnecessary retreat. Instead of escaping every difficult feeling, you ask, is this discomfort harming me? Or is it simply asking me to grow? Those are very different experiences. Another transformation occurs almost without notice. Your attention gradually shifts from outcomes to processes. In the beginning, you focus on finishing, losing weight, earning more, completing the project, winning the competition. As discipline matures, you begin appreciating the daily practice itself. The workout, the writing, the study session, the conversation. This doesn't mean goals disappear. It means they stop carrying all the emotional weight. You discover satisfaction in the path rather than only the destination. That realization protects you from one of life's greatest disappointments. Many people finally achieve the goal they dreamed about, only to discover they still have to wake up the next morning. The destination lasts a moment. The process becomes your life. Quiet discipline teaches you to build a life whose ordinary days are worth living, not merely a life chasing extraordinary milestones. Perhaps the deepest change of all is this. You become less reactive, not because you stop feeling emotions, because you stop obeying every emotion immediately. A moment of frustration no longer dictates your entire afternoon. A burst of anxiety no longer controls your next decision. A wave of self-doubt no longer convinces you to abandon months of progress. Between feeling and action, a small space appears. Inside that space lives choice, and inside choice lives freedom. This may be the quiet discipline no one talks about most often. Not the ability to force yourself, the ability to pause, to observe, to remember who you're becoming before deciding what to do next. As that pause grows stronger, so does your mind. You become less controlled by impulse, less dependent on mood, less shaken by temporary setbacks. The world around you may remain just as noisy as before. Deadlines will still arrive. People will still disappoint you. Unexpected problems will still appear. But inside, something has changed. Your thoughts become steadier. Your decisions become clearer. Your promises become more believable. And slowly, almost without noticing, you begin thinking like the person you once hoped to become. Chapter 10. Becoming comfortable with slow results. One of the hardest things you will ever learn has nothing to do with effort. It has everything to do with waiting. Most people are willing to work hard for a while. They are willing to wake up early. They are willing to sacrifice comfort. They are willing to learn new skills. But there is one condition hidden beneath all that willingness. They expect to see proof that their effort is paying off. Soon. If the proof arrives quickly, enthusiasm grows. If the proof is delayed, doubt quietly takes its place. This is where countless worthwhile journeys come to an end. Not because the work was too difficult, because the results were too slow. Imagine planting a bamboo seed. You water it every day. You care for the soil. You protect it from weeds. Weeks pass, nothing appears. Months pass, still nothing. Someone walking past might reasonably conclude that your efforts are pointless. Perhaps the seed was dead. Perhaps you chose the wrong place. Perhaps you should stop wasting your time. Yet, beneath the surface, an extraordinary process is unfolding. Roots are spreading. Strength is developing. A foundation is quietly taking shape. When the visible growth finally comes, it seems astonishing. But the visible growth was never the beginning. It was the consequence of everything that happened underground. Human development follows the same pattern. Before your confidence becomes visible, your self-trust grows in silence. Before your skills impress others, they improve through countless unnoticed repetitions. Before your habits reshape your life, They reshape your identity. The roots always come before the branches. Unfortunately, modern life trains us to expect the opposite. We order something today and expect it tomorrow. We search for an answer and receive it in seconds. We watch videos that compress years of progress into a few inspiring minutes. Without realizing it, we begin expecting our own lives to move at the same speed. When they don't, impatience feels like evidence that something has gone wrong. But time has not changed. Only our expectations have. There is a fascinating difference between children and experienced craftspeople. A child planting a seed often digs it up after a few days to see whether it has started growing. The child cannot resist checking. The craftsman understands that constant inspection interrupts the very process they hope to witness. Sometimes your own goals require the patience of the craftsman rather than the curiosity of the child. Every day you ask, "Am I there yet?" you risk disturbing the quiet work that only time can complete. This doesn't mean ignoring progress altogether. Reflection matters. Adjustment matters. Learning matters. But there is a difference between thoughtful evaluation and constant reassurance. Many people don't actually need better habits. They need a healthy relationship with time. Think about learning to speak another language. For weeks, improvement feels almost invisible. You still struggle with conversations. You still search for words. Mistakes remain frequent. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happens. You understand an entire conversation without translating every sentence in your mind. Where did that ability come from? It wasn't created that afternoon. It had been accumulating quietly for months. Progress often reveals itself suddenly, after developing gradually. This is why patience and perception are closely connected. If you only recognize dramatic improvement, you will overlook the thousands of subtle changes leading toward it. You may read slightly faster than last month, recover more quickly after setbacks, become calmer during disagreements, find yourself reaching for a book instead of your phone, speak with a little more confidence. These changes are easy to dismiss because each one seems so small. But together they are quietly transforming your life. The problem is not that progress is absent. The problem is that it rarely announces itself. There is another hidden danger in expecting fast results. It encourages desperate decisions. When people become impatient, they often abandon good processes in search of exciting alternatives. The person building strength changes workout programs every 3 weeks. The entrepreneur abandons a promising business idea after one difficult season. The writer starts 5 books without finishing one. The student jumps between learning methods every month. From the outside, it appears they are adapting. Often, they are simply escaping the discomfort of waiting. Quiet discipline teaches a different lesson. Do not confuse boredom with stagnation. Sometimes boredom simply means you've become familiar with the process, and familiarity is often the birthplace of mastery. Imagine watching a master violinist practice. There is no dramatic soundtrack, no inspiring speech, no miraculous breakthrough every hour. There are scales, corrections, repetition, silence, tiny adjustments that no audience would applaud. Yet, those invisible refinements eventually become performances that seem effortless. The audience sees elegance. The musician remembers patience. There is wisdom in becoming the kind of person who can wait without becoming passive. Waiting does not mean doing nothing. It means continuing meaningful action without demanding immediate rewards. That distinction changes everything. A gardener cannot force fruit to grow faster by worrying about it. A baker cannot hurry bread by opening the oven every few minutes. A sculptor cannot rush marble by striking it wildly. Some processes are accelerated by effort. Others are completed only by time. Learning which is part of maturity. This understanding also changes how you respond to comparison. It is easy to become discouraged when someone else's results appear to arrive more quickly. Perhaps a colleague receives the promotion first. Perhaps a friend builds a successful business sooner. Perhaps someone younger reaches a milestone you hoped to achieve. Comparison quietly whispers, "You're falling behind." But behind whom? Everyone begins from a different place, carries different responsibilities, faces different obstacles, lives according to different priorities. Comparing timelines is like comparing the growth of an oak tree to a sunflower. Both are alive. Both are growing. Neither is failing because it develops differently. Quiet discipline asks only one meaningful question: am I moving in the right direction? Not faster than everyone else, not more impressively than everyone else. Simply forward. Forward is enough. There is enormous peace hidden inside that realization, because once your attention shifts from speed to direction, impatience loses much of its power. You stop measuring yourself by how quickly life changes. You begin measuring yourself by how faithfully you continue. Perhaps this is why the strongest people often appear surprisingly patient. Not because they enjoy waiting, because they understand what waiting makes possible. They know that deep roots require time. Meaningful relationships require time. Mastery requires time. Character requires time. None of these treasures can be rushed without losing something essential. As the years pass, you may discover a beautiful irony. The seasons in which you believed nothing was happening were often the seasons that changed you the most. The quiet months, the repetitive routines, the mornings that looked exactly like the day before, the evenings when nobody noticed your effort. Those ordinary stretches of time were never empty. They were preparing you. Just as rivers slowly carve valleys that seem impossible to create, patient consistency quietly reshapes a human life, not through dramatic leaps, not through constant excitement, but through the gentle, persistent accumulation of days that appeared insignificant while they were being lived. And one morning you will look back, not because one extraordinary event changed everything, but because thousands of ordinary moments quietly carried you somewhere entirely new. Chapter 11. Protecting your attention from everyday friction. If someone wanted to quietly change the direction of your life without your permission, they would not need to steal your money. They would not need to damage your health. They would not even need to take away your time. They would only need to control your attention, because wherever your attention repeatedly goes, your life eventually follows. This truth is easy to overlook because attention feels invisible. You cannot hold it in your hands. You cannot measure it the way you measure distance or weight. Yet every meaningful achievement you admire began with sustained attention directed towards something worthwhile. A scientist gives years of attention to a difficult question. A musician gives thousands of hours of attention to an instrument. A parent gives attention to a child, day after day, conversation after conversation. A craftsperson gives attention to details most people will never notice. Attention is the quiet currency from which meaningful lives are built, and like any valuable currency, it can be spent wisely or carelessly. The difficulty is that modern life is filled with small forms of friction that quietly pull your attention away from what matters. Notice that word, friction, not catastrophe, not crisis, friction. The tiny interruptions that seem harmless on their own, but become surprisingly expensive when repeated dozens of times each day. You sit down to work. A notification appears. You tell yourself it will only take a few seconds. 5 minutes disappear. You return to your task. Just as your concentration begins to settle, another message arrives. Someone tags you in a photo. A headline catches your eye. An email appears. Another interruption. Another restart. By the end of the day, you feel busy, yet strangely dissatisfied. The work never became deep enough to feel meaningful. This is one of the hidden costs of constant interruption. The interruption itself is often small. Recovering your attention is what consumes the greater energy. Imagine reading a novel. Every 2 pages, someone closes the book and asks you an unrelated question. You answer politely. Then, try to remember where you were. Soon the story feels fragmented. The experience becomes exhausting. Now imagine living your entire day that way. For many people, that is normal. Not because they lack discipline, because interruption has become ordinary. Quiet discipline begins by recognizing that attention deserves protection. Not occasional protection, daily protection. Think about a museum. The most valuable works are not left unattended in the middle of a busy street. They are carefully preserved. Climate controlled, protected from unnecessary damage. Your attention deserves similar respect. Because once scattered, it is remarkably difficult to gather again. There is another kind of friction that receives less attention. Mental clutter. Have you ever noticed how unfinished tasks quietly occupy your thoughts? An email you still need to answer, a conversation you keep postponing, a drawer you meant to organize, a bill you forgot to pay. Individually, each responsibility is small. Together, they create a constant background noise, like a room filled with dozens of conversations happening at once. Nothing is loud enough to demand immediate action. Yet everything quietly competes for your awareness. The mind grows tired, not only from work, but from carrying unfinished intentions. This is why simple habits often produce disproportionate peace. Writing tomorrow's priorities before going to sleep. Putting keys in the same place each evening. Preparing clothes the night before. Cleaning your workspace after finishing. These actions seem ordinary, because they are. But they remove friction before it has an opportunity to multiply. Quiet discipline often succeeds not by becoming stronger than chaos, but by creating less chaos in the first place. Imagine walking through a forest trail. If branches constantly block your path, every step requires unnecessary effort. Now imagine someone quietly clearing those branches every morning. The destination has not moved. You have not become stronger overnight. The journey has simply become smoother. Much of discipline works exactly this way. People often admire someone's consistency without noticing the environment that quietly supports it. They see the visible action. They miss the invisible preparation. A writer who begins each morning with a clean desk. An athlete who lays out training clothes the night before. A student who leaves the phone in another room while studying. These are not acts of extraordinary willpower. They are acts of thoughtful design. Instead of relying on constant self-control, they reduce unnecessary temptation. This distinction matters. Many people imagine discipline as a continuous battle against themselves. Every decision feels like a contest between responsibility and desire. But quiet discipline asks a different question. Can I make the right choice easier? That question shifts your focus. Instead of demanding more strength, you begin removing unnecessary obstacles. If healthy food is easier to reach than unhealthy food, better choices become more likely. If your book is already waiting on your bedside table, reading becomes easier. If distracting apps are removed from your phone during work hours, concentration becomes less fragile. The goal is not perfection. It is reducing friction between your intentions and your actions. There is another source of friction that many people overlook: too many decisions. Every choice consumes a small amount of mental energy. What should I wear? What should I eat? When should I exercise? Which task should I begin? Should I answer this message now or later? Individually, these questions seem harmless. Collectively, they slowly drain your ability to focus on what truly matters. This is why many disciplined people simplify surprisingly ordinary parts of life. Not because they dislike variety, because they understand the value of preserving attention. The fewer unnecessary decisions they make, the more energy remains for meaningful ones. Think of a river. When its water flows in one direction, it gathers strength. When divided into countless small streams, each branch becomes weaker. Your attention behaves the same way. Scattered attention creates scattered results. Focused attention quietly gathers power over time. This does not mean you must eliminate every distraction forever. That would neither be realistic nor healthy. Rest matters. Play matters. Conversation matters. Curiosity matters. The issue is not whether distraction exists. The issue is whether distraction quietly becomes your default state. There is an important difference between choosing entertainment and unconsciously drifting into it. One is intentional. The other slowly steals hours without permission. Quiet discipline values intention. It asks you to notice where your attention goes before asking where your time went. Because time and attention are not identical, you can spend an hour physically present while your attention lives somewhere else entirely. Likewise, a deeply focused 20 minutes can accomplish more than several distracted hours. Quality of attention often matters more than quantity of time. As you grow, you may notice something unexpected. Protecting your attention also protects your peace. When every headline demands outrage, every notification demands urgency, every opinion demands a response, your inner world begins reflecting that same restlessness. But when you choose carefully what deserves your attention, something changes. The noise outside becomes less capable of creating noise inside. Calm is no longer something you search for after the day ends. It becomes something you quietly preserve throughout the day itself. Perhaps this is why truly disciplined people often appear unhurried, not because they have fewer responsibilities, because they have learned that attention is finite. They refuse to spend it carelessly. They know that every unnecessary distraction asks a hidden question. Is this worthy of a piece of your life? Most of the time, the answer is no. And every time they quietly decline that invitation, they create space for something far more valuable. Meaningful work, meaningful relationships, meaningful thought, not through extraordinary effort, but through the quiet discipline of protecting what was precious all along, their attention. Chapter 12. The confidence that never needs to be proved. There is a kind of confidence that enters a room before a person says a single word. It isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't announce itself through expensive clothes, impressive titles, or carefully rehearsed stories. In fact, many people overlook it at first, because we've been taught to recognize confidence by its volume. The loudest voice, the boldest opinion, the person who always seems certain. But volume and confidence are not the same thing. Sometimes the loudest certainty is quietly protecting the deepest insecurity. And sometimes the calmest person in the room has already stopped needing to convince anyone of their worth. This is the confidence quiet discipline creates, not the confidence that depends on winning every argument. Not the confidence that comes from always being the smartest or most talented, but the confidence that grows from keeping promises to yourself so consistently that your self-respect no longer depends on other people's approval. This distinction changes everything. Many people spend years trying to appear confident. They practice body language, memorize conversation techniques, learn how to make stronger first impressions. These skills can certainly be useful. But appearance is fragile. The moment criticism arrives, borrowed confidence often begins to crack. Quiet discipline builds something deeper. It builds evidence. Imagine hiring two builders. The first confidently tells you that he can construct the strongest house you've ever seen. He speaks beautifully. He sounds convincing. The second says very little. Instead, he quietly shows you the homes he has already built. Whom would you trust? Probably the second. Not because he spoke better, because evidence carries a different kind of authority. Your relationship with yourself works exactly the same way. Every time you keep a promise, you quietly add another piece of evidence. I said I would wake up early. You did. I said I would finish this project. You did. I said I would have that difficult conversation. You did. None of these moments seem dramatic, but together they become a foundation that no compliment can create and no criticism can easily destroy. That foundation is self-respect. People often confuse self-esteem with self-respect. Self-esteem is often connected to how you feel about yourself. Self-respect is connected to how consistently you honor your own values. Feelings rise and fall. Respect accumulates. This is why someone can receive endless praise from others, yet still feel uncertain inside. Their confidence rests on opinions they cannot control. Another person may receive little recognition at all, yet move through life with remarkable steadiness. Their confidence rests on something much quieter. Integrity? Integrity is simply the alignment between what you believe and what you repeatedly do. When those two things remain connected, the mind becomes calmer. There is less internal conflict, less pretending, less need to impress. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents an unfinished promise, the workout you kept postponing, the apology you never offered, the project you abandoned, the responsibility you avoided. Individually, each stone seems manageable. Together, they become exhausting. Many people think their lack of confidence comes from not achieving enough. Sometimes it comes from carrying too many broken promises. Now imagine removing those stones one by one, not through grand gestures, through quiet completion, one conversation, one task, one promise kept. Gradually, the backpack becomes lighter. Walking becomes easier. Confidence often feels this way, not something added from the outside, something uncovered as unnecessary weight disappears. There is another remarkable quality of earned confidence. It doesn't need constant comparison. When confidence depends on being better than someone else, peace becomes impossible. No matter how successful you become, someone will always appear wealthier, stronger, smarter, younger, or more accomplished. Comparison creates a race with no finish line. Quiet discipline quietly steps off that track. Instead of asking, "Am I ahead of them?" it asks, "Am I becoming more trustworthy than I was yesterday?" Notice how different that question feels. It redirects attention inward, toward growth instead of competition, toward progress instead of performance. This shift also changes the way you respond to criticism. Imagine two trees standing in a field. One has deep roots. The other has shallow roots. When strong winds arrive, both trees experience the same storm. The difference lies beneath the surface. The deeply rooted tree bends. The shallow-rooted tree fears every gust. Criticism works similarly. If your confidence depends entirely on external approval, every negative opinion feels threatening. If your confidence grows from repeated evidence and quiet discipline, criticism still matters, but it no longer defines you. You become capable of asking, "Is there something useful here?" instead of immediately wondering, "Does this mean I'm not good enough?" That is emotional strength, not the absence of vulnerability, the ability to remain steady while learning. Quiet discipline also changes your relationship with success itself. In the beginning, success often feels like proof of worth. Every achievement carries enormous emotional weight. Every failure feels deeply personal. Over time, something healthier develops. Success becomes feedback rather than identity. Failure becomes instruction rather than condemnation. This perspective creates remarkable freedom. You no longer need every outcome to protect your self-image, because your self-image is no longer built on outcomes alone. It is built on character. Think of an experienced sailor. When the sea becomes rough, panic serves no purpose. The sailor adjusts the sails, studies the wind, respects the waves. Experience has replaced drama. Confidence often matures in exactly the same way. The more evidence you collect through quiet discipline, the less emotional energy you waste proving yourself. There is another sign that confidence has become genuine. You stop needing to speak first. Many insecure people mistake silence for weakness. In reality, silence often requires far more confidence than constant explanation. Someone who trusts themselves does not feel compelled to win every argument, correct every misunderstanding, display every accomplishment. They understand that not every opinion requires a response. Not every challenge deserves acceptance. Not every misunderstanding needs immediate correction. This restraint is not passivity, it is security. The person who constantly announces their strength is often still asking the world to confirm it. The person who quietly lives their values has already received that confirmation from within. Perhaps this is why truly confident people often make others feel calm rather than intimidated. Their presence carries no desperate need to dominate, only quiet certainty. As this chapter comes to a close, consider where your own confidence comes from. Is it built on compliments, achievements, recognition? Or is it slowly being built through something far more dependable? The promises you keep when nobody is watching, the work you complete without applause. The honesty you choose when shortcuts would be easier, the discipline you practice long before results become visible, because that kind of confidence asks nothing from the world. It does not beg to be noticed. It does not fear being overlooked. It simply stands, quietly, steadily, like a mountain that never needs to remind anyone it is there. And perhaps that is the strongest confidence of all. Chapter 13. What quiet discipline looks like during difficult seasons. It is easy to believe in discipline when life is cooperating, when you sleep well, when your work is going smoothly, when your relationships feel stable, when your health is strong, when your calendar has room to breathe. During those seasons, discipline almost feels natural. You wake up on time. You prepare healthy meals. You exercise. You read. You keep your promises. Everything appears to fit together. Then life changes. A loved one becomes ill. Your workload doubles. Money becomes tight. Your plans collapse. You lose someone you care about. Or perhaps nothing dramatic happens at all. Perhaps you simply wake up one morning carrying a heaviness you cannot fully explain. The same habits that once felt manageable now seem surprisingly difficult. This is the moment when many people begin questioning themselves. What's wrong with me? Why can't I stay consistent anymore? Have I lost my discipline? But these questions often begin with the wrong assumption. They assume discipline should look the same in every season of life. It never does. Consider a tree through the course of a year. In spring, it produces new leaves. In summer, it grows. In autumn, it lets go. In winter, it appears almost lifeless. Yet, beneath the frozen ground, the roots remain alive. No one accuses the tree of failing because it does not bloom in January. We understand that different seasons ask for different forms of strength. Human life follows the same rhythm. There are seasons for building, seasons for recovering, seasons for grieving, seasons for beginning again. Quiet discipline is not the refusal to acknowledge these differences. It is the wisdom to adapt without abandoning your values. This distinction is important. Many people confuse adaptation with surrender. Imagine someone who exercises 6 days a week. Then an injury forces them to stop. One response is to quit entirely. Another is to adjust. Perhaps they begin walking instead. Perhaps they focus on physical therapy. Perhaps they strengthen another part of their body while allowing the injured area to heal. The routine changes. The identity remains. They are still someone who cares for their health. The expression of that commitment simply looks different. The same principle applies far beyond physical fitness. During demanding seasons, your reading habit may shrink from 30 pages to 5. Your meditation may become 5 quiet breaths instead of 30 peaceful minutes. Your writing session may last 15 minutes instead of 2 hours. From the outside, it may seem like less. From the perspective of quiet discipline, it is continuity. Continuity matters because difficult seasons have a way of convincing us that temporary circumstances are permanent truths. A stressful month begins whispering, "This is who you are now." A painful setback says, "You'll never recover." An exhausting week insists, "You've lost everything you've built." But storms have always had one remarkable characteristic. They eventually pass. The challenge is remembering this while standing in the rain. There is another subtle danger hidden inside hardship. When life becomes painful, we naturally seek relief. There is nothing wrong with that. Relief is human. The question is where we look for it. Some forms of relief restore us. A quiet walk, an honest conversation, rest, prayer, journaling, time in nature, meaningful silence. Other forms merely distract us. Endless scrolling, mindless consumption, avoidance, constant busyness. Temporary pleasures that postpone discomfort without resolving it. The difference often becomes clear only with time. One leaves you stronger. The other leaves you emptier. Quiet discipline does not ask you to ignore pain. It asks you to choose forms of comfort that protect your future instead of borrowing from it. Think of a person crossing a desert. They cannot eliminate the heat. They cannot shorten the journey, but they can decide how carefully they use the water they carry. Attention, energy, hope, patience. These resources become precious during difficult seasons. Discipline helps you spend them wisely. One of the most beautiful qualities of quiet discipline is that it lowers the standard without lowering the commitment. That may sound contradictory. It isn't. Suppose your normal morning routine takes 90 minutes. Then a newborn child enters your life. Or an aging parent begins needing daily care. Or your work schedule changes unexpectedly. Insisting on the exact same routine may become unrealistic. Quiet discipline quietly asks, what does faithfulness look like now? Perhaps the answer is 15 intentional minutes. Perhaps it is one meaningful habit instead of 6. Perhaps it is simply getting enough sleep because recovery has become your highest responsibility. This is not compromise. It is maturity. Many people abandon discipline because they confuse flexibility with failure. They believe that if they cannot do everything, they should do nothing. Quiet discipline rejects this false choice. It whispers, "Do what this season allows." That single sentence has rescued countless meaningful habits. There is also another truth that only difficult seasons reveal. They expose which habits were built on convenience and which were built on conviction. Anyone can remain calm when nothing is testing them. Anyone can be patient when nobody is frustrating them. Anyone can feel grateful when life is generous. But hardship quietly asks a deeper question. Who are you when circumstances stop cooperating? The answer is rarely found in one dramatic moment. It appears in ordinary responses. You still speak kindly, even though you're tired. You still tell the truth, even when it costs you. You still keep one promise, even if you cannot keep them all. Character rarely grows because life is easy. It grows because values continue breathing inside difficult circumstances. Imagine an old lighthouse standing beside a rough sea. Its purpose is not tested on clear afternoons. Its purpose is revealed during storms. The waves become violent. The wind becomes fierce. Visibility disappears. Yet the light continues turning. Not because the weather is favorable. Because that is what the lighthouse exists to do. Your own values deserve that kind of steadiness. Not perfection. Steadiness. You will have seasons when your progress seems invisible. Days when your motivation disappears. Weeks when life asks more from you than you believe you can give. During those seasons, remember this. The goal is not to prove how strong you are. The goal is to remain connected to the person you are becoming. Even if that connection feels quieter than before, even if it is expressed through smaller actions, even if no one else notices. Because resilience is rarely loud. It is often found in the person who quietly returns tomorrow and the day after that, not with dramatic declarations, not because everything has become easy, but because they understand something that difficult seasons eventually teach everyone willing to listen. Strength is not measured by how perfectly you perform when life is easy. It is measured by how gently and how faithfully you continue when life is hard. And when the season finally changes, as seasons always do, you will discover that you did not merely survive it. You were quietly shaped by it. Chapter 14. Living below the level of your potential on purpose. There is an idea that sounds almost offensive in a culture obsessed with maximizing everything. Don't give 100% all the time. At first, it feels wrong. We've been taught that success belongs to those who constantly push harder, work longer, and squeeze every possible ounce of effort from every single day. Leave it all on the table. Go all in. No days off. These phrases sound inspiring. For short periods, they may even be useful. But no human being lives an entire life in a state of maximum output. The body wasn't designed for it. Neither was the mind. Quiet discipline understands something that intensity often forgets. The goal is not to win today. The goal is to still be standing years from now. Imagine a marathon runner who sprints the first kilometer with every ounce of energy. The crowd cheers. The pace looks extraordinary. For a few minutes, they lead the race. Then, reality arrives. Their breathing becomes erratic. Their legs begin to fail. The energy they spent so freely cannot be recovered. Meanwhile, another runner begins at a pace that almost seems conservative. They breathe steadily. They remain patient. They allow others to rush ahead. Hours later, many of those runners have slowed dramatically. Some have stopped altogether. The patient runner continues. Not because they were the fastest, because they understood the difference between performance and endurance. Life rewards endurance far more often than dramatic beginnings. There is wisdom in leaving something in reserve. Athletes understand this. Experienced musicians understand it. Master craftspeople understand it. The best builders do not use materials right at the edge of failure. Engineers create safety margins. Pilots carry reserve fuel. Farmers preserve seed for the next season. Nature itself rarely spends every available resource at once. Only humans seem convinced that constant exhaustion is evidence of commitment. But exhaustion is not the same thing as dedication. Sometimes it is simply poor pacing. Think about a candle. Burn it from both ends, and for a short time it produces a brighter flame. Then it disappears much sooner than it should have. Many lives quietly resemble that candle. Constant urgency, constant availability, constant productivity. Until one day, there is nothing left to give. Burnout rarely arrives without warning. It usually whispers long before it shouts. You become impatient with small inconveniences. Simple tasks begin feeling unusually heavy. Sleep no longer restores you. Your attention scatters. Joy quietly disappears from activities you once loved. These are not always signs that you need more discipline. Sometimes they are signs that your discipline has lost its wisdom. Quiet discipline is not measured by how much you can survive. It is measured by how intelligently you preserve your capacity to continue. This requires a kind of restraint that many people misunderstand. Restraint often looks unimpressive. Imagine a writer finishing the day's work while ideas are still flowing. Someone watching might think, "Why stop now? You're making progress." The writer understands something deeper. If they continue until complete exhaustion every day, tomorrow becomes harder. Stopping while energy still remains protects tomorrow's work. The same principle appears everywhere: leaving the gym before complete fatigue, ending the workday with enough attention left for your family, choosing sleep over one more hour of productivity, taking a walk before stress becomes anger. These decisions rarely impress anyone, but they quietly protect the future. There is another benefit to living below your maximum. You become less dependent on perfect conditions. Suppose your routine already demands every ounce of energy you possess. What happens when life becomes more demanding? A child becomes sick. An unexpected project appears. Travel interrupts your schedule. A family emergency unfolds. There is nowhere to adapt. Your system collapses because no margin exists. But when your life includes breathing room, flexibility becomes possible. The strongest bridge is not the one that barely supports today's traffic. It is the one designed to carry more than it usually needs to. Resilience grows from reserve, not from constant strain. This idea also changes your relationship with ambition. Many people fear slowing down because they mistake it for settling. But slowing down is not the same thing as lowering your standards. Sometimes, it is the very decision that allows those standards to survive. Imagine climbing a mountain. You could attempt to race toward the summit without stopping. Perhaps you would even make impressive progress during the first few hours. But experienced climbers understand altitude. They pause. They hydrate. They adjust. They protect themselves from pushing beyond what today's conditions allow. The goal remains unchanged. The method becomes wiser. Quiet discipline works the same way. It never asks you to abandon meaningful goals. It asks you to pursue them in a way that your future self will thank you for. There is another lesson hidden inside restraint. It teaches you that your worth is not measured by constant output. This can be difficult to accept, especially in a world where productivity often becomes identity. When someone asks how you're doing, how often is the answer, busy, as though exhaustion itself has become a symbol of importance. But busyness and significance are not identical. You can fill every hour of the day while neglecting what matters most. You can move constantly without moving meaningfully. Quiet discipline invites a different measure. Instead of asking, "How much did I do?" it asks, "Did I protect what allows me to continue doing meaningful work?" Health, attention, relationships, integrity. These are not interruptions to productivity. They are its foundation. Neglect the foundation long enough, and eventually the structure begins to crack. Perhaps the deepest wisdom of all is recognizing that your future self is a person worthy of consideration. Every late night borrowed from tomorrow, every promise made beyond your capacity, every unnecessary burden accepted to avoid disappointing someone else. These choices often steal from the version of you who must live with their consequences. Quiet discipline remembers tomorrow, not with anxiety, with respect. It understands that discipline is not merely about getting through today. It is about arriving at next year with your curiosity intact, your kindness intact, your health intact, your purpose intact. When people look at those who accomplish meaningful things over decades, they often assume they possessed unusual determination. Sometimes they did. More often, they possessed unusual patience. They understood that a meaningful life is not built through constant acceleration. It is built through sustainable devotion, through showing up often enough, long enough, that time becomes your greatest ally instead of your greatest enemy. As this chapter closes, consider one simple question. If you continued living exactly as you are today for the next 10 years, would your pace be sustainable? Not for one extraordinary month. Not for one demanding season. For 10 ordinary years. If the answer is no, perhaps the most disciplined decision you could make is not pushing harder. Perhaps it is learning where to stop, where to rest, where to preserve strength for tomorrow. Because quiet discipline is not trying to prove how much you can carry. It is quietly preparing you to carry what truly matters for a lifetime. Chapter 15. The Silent Life. You build one ordinary day at a time. Imagine meeting two people 10 years from today. Both are the same age. Both began with similar opportunities. Both dreamed about becoming healthier, calmer, wiser, and more fulfilled. Yet, the lives they now live seem completely different. One moves through the world with quiet confidence. They are dependable. Their relationships are strong. Their work carries depth. They remain calm when unexpected problems arise. They are not perfect, but they possess an unmistakable steadiness that others naturally trust. The other person is not lacking intelligence or potential. They simply spent years waiting to feel motivated, waiting for the perfect opportunity, waiting until life became less complicated, waiting until they finally became the kind of person they imagined they would someday be. Looking at these two lives from the outside, it is tempting to believe that one person was simply more gifted. But if you could quietly replay the previous decade, you would notice something very different. The distance between them was not created by one extraordinary decision. It was created by thousands of ordinary ones. One chose to continue after enthusiasm disappeared. The other waited for enthusiasm to return. One protected attention. The other surrendered it to whatever demanded it most loudly. One accepted slow progress. The other constantly searched for faster results. One quietly kept promises that nobody else could see. The other underestimated those promises because they seemed too small to matter. The remarkable life was not built in dramatic moments. It was assembled in ordinary afternoons. This is perhaps the greatest misunderstanding about discipline. People imagine that discipline is preparing them for extraordinary occasions. In truth, discipline is teaching you how to live ordinary days extraordinarily well. Because ordinary days are not interruptions between important moments. They are your life. Think back to everything we have explored together. We began by discovering that real discipline rarely announces itself. It does not demand applause. It does not ask to be admired. Its greatest work happens quietly. We explored why the mind naturally chases novelty instead of steady progress. We learned that identity is not discovered overnight, but patiently built through repeated evidence. We saw how dramatic change often distracts us from the quieter transformations that truly endure. We recognized that motivation is a welcome visitor, but an unreliable foundation. We discovered that tiny decisions quietly redirect entire futures. We learned to work without needing an audience, to build rhythm instead of intensity, to trust slow results, to protect attention, to earn confidence through integrity, to remain faithful during difficult seasons. And finally, to preserve enough strength that discipline becomes sustainable for a lifetime. None of these ideas promised instant transformation. That was never the goal. Instead, they offered something much more valuable. A different relationship with your own life. Because eventually, the greatest reward of quiet discipline is not success. It is peace. The peace of knowing that your actions and your values no longer argue with one another. The peace of waking each morning without needing to invent a new version of yourself. The peace of trusting your own word. There is a beautiful simplicity hidden inside that kind of life. Imagine an old clock hanging on the wall of a small home. Hour after hour, day after day, year after year, it performs the same quiet movement. It does not hurry. It does not become impatient because yesterday looks similar. It simply continues. One tick, then another. If you watched for only a minute, its movement would seem almost meaningless. Return after 20 years, and it has faithfully measured an entire lifetime. Human character often grows in the same quiet rhythm, not through dramatic leaps, through faithful repetition. There will still be difficult mornings. There will still be setbacks. You will still have days when your attention wanders, when your patience becomes thin, when old habits quietly invite you back. Quiet discipline never promised perfection. It promised return. That may be its greatest gift. Not that you will never drift, but that drifting no longer becomes your destination. You know how to come back. Back to the next honest conversation. Back to the next page. Back to the next walk. Back to the next promise. Again and again, until returning itself becomes a habit, and something extraordinary happens. You stop thinking of discipline as something you have to force. It becomes the natural expression of the person you have patiently become. People may eventually notice the results. They may admire your calm, your reliability, your consistency, your confidence. They may ask how you managed to become so disciplined. You might smile, searching for a dramatic answer, but none will come, because there wasn't one. There were only mornings that no one remembers, conversations no one applauded, books no one saw you reading, walks no one counted, decisions so small they seemed almost invisible. Each one alone looked insignificant. Together they quietly shaped an entire life. Perhaps that is why the most meaningful transformations often feel so ordinary while they are happening. The river never notices the valley it is carving one gentle current at a time. The tree never watches its roots growing beneath the earth. The sunrise never rushes because no one is watching. Nature teaches the same lesson again and again. What lasts rarely hurries. What endures rarely shouts. What truly changes the world often begins in silence. And so it is with you. Long after this audiobook ends, there will be another ordinary morning waiting. Nothing about it will seem historic. No music will announce its arrival. No audience will gather. Only another quiet opportunity to decide who you are becoming. You may never remember that particular morning, but your future will, because your future is always being built in moments that seem too ordinary to matter. This realization is not meant to overwhelm you. It is meant to free you. You do not need to transform your entire life today. You do not need extraordinary courage every morning. You do not need constant inspiration. You need only enough honesty to keep one promise, then another, then another. There is great dignity in such a life, not because it appears impressive, because it is real. Real growth, real patience, real integrity, real strength. Quiet discipline is, in the end, an act of respect. Respect for the person you are today. Respect for the person you hope to become. And respect for the countless ordinary days that quietly connect the two. If there is one thought worth carrying with you after these final words, let it be this: your life is not built during the rare moments when everything feels extraordinary. It is built during the ordinary moments when no one is watching, nothing feels remarkable, and you choose to do what matters anyway. That is the quiet discipline no one talks about, and perhaps it has been waiting for you all along. Outro. As we come to the end of this journey together, it is worth returning to the question that quietly followed us from the very beginning. What does real discipline actually look like? Not the version celebrated in dramatic stories. Not the version built on endless motivation or relentless intensity, but the version that survives ordinary life. Perhaps you have discovered that it looks much quieter than most people imagine. It is found in the promise you keep when breaking it would be easy. In the patient decision to continue when progress is too small to measure. In the willingness to protect your attention instead of giving it away to every distraction. In the courage to begin again after difficult seasons without believing you have failed. And in the humility to understand that meaningful change rarely asks for perfection. It asks for persistence. If there is one lesson connecting every chapter of this audiobook, it is this: the life you admire is rarely created by extraordinary moments. It is assembled through ordinary ones. A conversation handled with patience, a page read before bed, a workout completed without excitement, an honest choice made when no one else would ever know. These moments seem almost invisible while they are happening, yet they quietly become the architecture of your character. Years from now, people may notice your calm, your confidence, or your consistency. They may assume those qualities appeared naturally or arrived all at once. Only you will know the truth. They were built one ordinary day at a time. That realization is deeply encouraging because it means your future is not waiting for one perfect opportunity. It is waiting for your next faithful decision. You do not need to become a different person overnight. You only need to continue becoming the person your daily actions are already shaping. Some mornings will still feel difficult. Some seasons will still test your patience. There will be setbacks, distractions, and moments when you question whether your efforts are making any difference. When those moments come, remember this: the strongest roots always grow where no one can see them. Your own growth often follows the same quiet path. Keep honoring the promises that matter. Keep protecting your attention. Keep returning after setbacks. Keep choosing what is meaningful over what is merely urgent. Those choices may never create dramatic headlines, but they will quietly create a life that no shortcut ever could. Thank you for spending this time with us. If this audiobook gave you something to reflect on, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us continue creating thoughtful audiobooks like this. Until next time, may your ordinary days become the place where your strongest character is quietly built, one calm, faithful choice at a time.